election, you see what the Fed does. Well, the Fed, there's a couple reasons we should oppose the Fed. One, how about this for a reason for opposing the Fed? What about it's unconstitutional to have central bank? There's no authorization in the central bank. The argument's going on for a long time. Jefferson and Hamilton argued about it, but it was ups and downs. They tried it, and it would be undermined, and then it would be ended, and they'd try another one. But since 1913, we as people have been too complacent, and we've gotten ourselves into this mess. So the other thing is maybe it's immoral to have a secret bank, a secret group of people who literally debase the money and they're not accountable. So it's a moral issue for me that they shouldn't have this privilege to do that. Economically, of course, it's so totally unsound to allow the central bank to print money, alter the interest rates, and cause the financial bubble. But one of another very important reason to be concerned about the Federal Reserve is that it facilitates the destruction of liberty because it facilitates big government. It pretends that government doesn't have to pay its bills, and the payments usually are delayed. So yes, we tax a lot, way too much. Of course, we tax too much, and that is way too much. But then we borrow too much. And then, of course, the ultimate deal is if Congress overspends, they really don't have to worry about it. And that is because the Fed comes and they buy that particular debt. So what does the government do? What does the politician do? Well, the politician loves it because the pain and the suffering doesn't come. There are times when it looks like, oh, this is a good deal. I'm getting a house, no money down, the interest rates are low, and the price of the house is going up. This is a wonderful thing. Everybody who provides, the supplies for the houses, they make money. The mortgage people make money. Until finally the bubble bursts and the whole thing, has to be reversed. But as long as the Fed is there, the politician is going to spend money because that's how the politician gets reelected. What do you need? Oh, well, I need more of this, this, and this. And the politician continues to spend and they don't worry about the deficit. Also, it facilitates our foreign policy. What if we would have had to pay literally for our foreign policy and all the interventionism that's been going on? It would have ended because it couldn't have been sustained. The people would have rebelled because the taxes would be so high and interest rates would go up. So, in other words, with the Federal Reserve, it allows the growth of government. And to the point where as the government grows, it diminishes our personal liberty. And as we do that, we undermine productivity, and the country has to get poorer. So now we face this horrendous crisis. We have a foreign policy that's totally out of control. We have a welfare state totally out of control. We have $60, $70, $80 trillion of entitlement obligations. We have a national debt of $14 trillion. And the politicians in Washington, you'd think they would wake up. But the other day we had 2 votes in the House floor. No meets and no end on the outcome of this. One had to do, conservative Republican leadership thought, the NPR, those national, the government radio, they said some nasty things. We need to punish them. But, they get a few $1 million here and there. I think it's $10 million, which is unconstitutional. I always vote against that, and I'm not defending it. But think in comparison of NPR and what they're getting, and then the same day we had a vote, a coalition of Democrats and Republicans came together and said, this is a resolution. If you vote for this, we're telling the president he ought to be out of Afghanistan by the end of this year. So we had a total of 93 votes to come home and quit pursuing a policy that was similar to the one that brought the Soviet system down. So overwhelmingly, and especially those conservative Republicans who are ready to balance the budget, supported continuing this policy, which just in Afghanistan costs us $130 billion a year. But no, then overwhelmingly they voted to delete the funds for NPR and be able to go home and say, hey, look at what we did. We're going to balance the budget on the back of NPR. It just struck me as totally inconsistent and not addressing the subject. That's because it's still political down there. And you have to think in bigger terms. You have to think about our policy. To deal with, and even Afghanistan, coming out of Afghanistan only addresses a small amount of that problem. It's the overall policy. It's the policy of interventionism. It's this policy that the founders advised us against. The founders said, no entangling alliances. Don't get involved in internal affairs of other nations. Be friends with nations. Trade with people, but stay out of these foreign entanglements. And of course, they were really pretty strict on the idea of militarism. They actually had this belief that you shouldn't even have a standing army. I mean, that's how but even under today's circumstances, you can have an army, but you can have a better foreign policy than the policy of the founders, the policy of the Constitution. We have no constitutional authority to go over and remake Afghanistan, take over the oil of Iraq, continue the bombing of Pakistan. You know, they're worried about some civilians being killed in Libya. Well, that is terrible. Now we're there for humanitarian reasons, but I don't believe that for a minute. Saudi Arabia, they happen to have a little bit of oil. Libya happens to have a little bit of oil. In the last 5 years, the West has been investing in Libya. But Rwanda didn't have any oil. Did we stop? Was we there for humanitarian reasons? The policy of non-intervention would keep our troops at home, and we would have a lot more peace. We would spend a lot less money. Our whole system wouldn't be threatened. Randolph Bourne had the best summary of what war is. He says, war is the health of the state. So if you love your liberty and you don't like the state, you have to be very, very cautious about ever going to war. The founders were very clear. The decision to go to war was not to be the president. It was to be the Congress. It was to be the House and the Senate, because they're closer to the people, and the executive branch was not to declare the war. But today, how do we go to war? It's under executive direction. Even the ones that ever since World War II, we have not had one declaration of war. We've had just police action. You know, and it's on and on. I was in the service in the 60s during Vietnam. I did not go to Vietnam. I was in for a total 5 years as a flight surgeon. But at that time, I had not thought these things through. A lot of people at 18 and 20 and 21, you know, were trying to get through school and get a job. I'm impressed that the young people today have thought a lot more about politics, and I can predict everybody in this room have thought a lot more about politics at your age than I did when I was your age, which I think is very encouraging. But if we change the policy, it would change everything. We would have our troops, so we wouldn't have troops in 130 countries. We have like 780 bases around the world. Then we say that we're not an imperialistic nation, that we are only there to take care of the people who need humanitarian help. And all of a sudden, you know, people now, I think, are starting to wake up. There's more questions, thankfully, about Libya than there has been in a long time, and I hope the American people keep the pressure on Washington so that we don't go and look for another war. We don't need another war. But you know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, before this whole thing broke out, that we knew that was being demonstrated again, I introduced a resolution. It was sent a Congress resolution to try to call attention to this.
The resolution simply said, if they would have gone into the